Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from YourBlackWorld.com. This week you saw that Professor Michael Fauntroy, an associate professor of public policy at George Mason University, took issue with Roland Martin in his release from CNN, and basically seemed to feel that Roland should probably not expect the whole community to jump out in his defense as if he's the only African-American capable of doing black social commentary on political issues. The article's on blackbluedog.com if you'd like to read those words, but one of the things I wanted to do, given that I respect both of these guys and I know both of these guys, I wanted to try to give people a chance to hear what Professor Fauntroy was intending to say in this piece. And so I have Professor Fauntroy on the line. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad we have a chance to talk. Because, you know, I reached out to Roland when you wrote your piece, and Roland had a response as well. And I said, okay, you know, it looks like these two guys are going back and forth. And I kind of threw my opinion on the issue, but I really wanted people to kind of hear what you were trying to say. What inspired you to write this article, and what were you thinking when you wrote it?
Well, it's been brewing for some time, and you know, there was not a particular spark per se, other than the message I sent out on Twitter last weekend, and someone took issue with that, and it just sort of rekindled in my own mind that a belief that we have a real problem with our political discourse in America, and that our political media is really less about expertise and information and more about sort of information and presentation. And he is the personification of that for me. And so that was what ultimately led me to write the piece. Quite honestly, it almost wrote itself, because I wrote the whole thing in about 15 or 20 minutes or so, quite honestly. You know, it was harsh, too hard. But the fact is that, you know, I think that, you know, the big issue for me is expertise. And I think there are too many people on TV talking about politics who don't really know a lot about politics, and certainly cannot be considered experts. And there are a full range of people like that. There are tons of people like that on Fox. But Roland Martin is one of the people that I consider to be on that list as well. And so that's just how we got to where we are now.
Okay, so for those who don't know, Roland's contract just ended with CNN. He's been there for quite a while. You know, I've heard people say that part of the reason that they were so anxious to hire him had something to do with his connection to the Obamas coming out of Chicago, is that his rise sort of correlated and coincided with the rise of President Obama. You know, so let me ask you this. You know, one of the things that I've heard people say is that, you know, this kind of back and forth would be something that might be unique to the black community because there are so few spaces available for qualified African-American commentators. I've often advocated for you and Dr. Wilmer Leon to get more airspace and airtime as expert commentators, because I know that both of you know politics. When I want to get a solid political perspective, I call you and I call Wilmer. That's pretty much who I call. So how much of this do you think is actually Roland's fault versus just the fault of the media structure and the few opportunities that are available to people of color?
Well, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. There's no question that this is about the decision makers who decide, the gatekeepers who decide who gets on and who doesn't. My only point with regard to Roland Martin is that he sort of exemplifies the decision-making process, that people are hired and put on the air, not necessarily because they're experts in the area, but because they may have a connection, or they may be telegenic, or they may project the image that the network wants to present. And I get that. That's capitalism. But the other side of that, though, is the people who are on television and radio and have these big megaphones have a tremendous amount of influence on public opinion. And so if somebody's on TV talking about something they don't really have a great grasp on, then that means that some people are going to believe that as if that's the end all and be all. And I don't think that's right. I think that all of these network executives who make decisions on who gets on and who doesn't should be driven by expertise. And I think it's possible to find people who have expertise and can also deliver well on TV. And I think that people who deliver well on TV but don't really have a grasp on it really shouldn't be there.
Interesting. Well, I want to ask you about something, Dr. Fauntroy. I'm going to read Roland's quote that he texted over to me, and I would like to get your direct reply to this. That's okay. Here's what
Sure.
Roland says. He says, and I'm just quoting here, how dumb can you be to write something like that and not even read my bio? I've only covered politics for 22 years, covered City Hall in 3 cities, county government reporter, covered 7 national political conventions, interviewed 3 U.S. presidents, countless cabinet members, U.S. senators, House members, governors, and mayors. I've used my TV One Washington Watch show and daily Tom Jordan morning show segments to give numerous black political scientists, economists, pollsters, and journalists an opportunity to share their knowledge and expertise. Did the same at the Houston Defender, Chicago Defender, Dallas Weekly, Savoy Magazine, and BlackAmericaWeb.com. Poor Michael. I guess reading is fundamental, even for folks with PhDs. How do you respond?
Yeah, I saw that quote and thought it was pretty curious. I don't think that just because you associate with people who are experts that you are necessarily an expert. Now, there's no question that there are people who are expert in politics based on their career in journalism. There's no doubt about that. I have been, during the course of my career and my research work, aided tremendously by people who worked in journalism. I don't dispute that at all. But those things he just described don't necessarily make him an expert. And it may make him knowledgeable, but I don't think it necessarily makes him an expert. And so, with regard to the bio, I plead guilty to that. I didn't read it before he went on, but just because he wrote it doesn't necessarily mean that it's entirely true. 22 years of covering all of these things. How much of that stuff is national? How many rope lines has he been on? How many times has he worked on a campaign? How much time has he spent studying these issues? As I indicated to him in a tweet yesterday, I'd be happy to compare my resume to his. And just like my question to him about whether or not he considers himself an expert, he didn't respond.
Interesting. So, what's interesting to me is that this debate between Michael Fauntroy and Roland Martin, it's not something that you would necessarily see, say, between, I guess, I don't know, let's say Wolf Blitzer and Tucker Carlson, or let's say you have somebody that really knows the science and has studied it versus somebody who has come at it from a journalistic standpoint. And so I will stand by that point that says that there should be stronger African American media outlets that allow for all the voices to come on the air. Because I think one of the problems that you might run into and that Wilmer runs into is that you focus on substance and not just the style. You have a lot of style. I've seen you. I've been on TV with you, but you also have a tremendous amount of substance. And it seems as though when it comes to choosing black commentators, 2 things I noticed with CNN and MSNBC is that black commentators, they tend to pick one that entertains them, and then also they tend to want that black entertainer or black person to fit into the liberal agenda. I believe Roland was fired from CNN because of the whole flap with GLAAD and the gay community. So what is your take in terms of how we can move forward in a way that doesn't lead people to kind of clash in this way, but actually just allows people like yourself and like Wilmer Leon and others to really have those opportunities they deserve?
Well, that's a really complicated question, and I think that to be fair, I do not believe that all of the pundits on TV, black or white for that matter, are unqualified for those jobs. And I also should say I think there's a difference between somebody who serves as a host and someone who serves as an analyst. And I think that's an important distinction because I think that too often we assume that just because somebody's on TV in one role that they can necessarily easily do something else. To the larger point with regard to outlets, I, Wilmer Leon, and everybody else who's interested in commenting on politics has to understand that there's a limited universe. There's just not enough space for everybody to have regular access to the microphone, and I get that. So it seems to me that one of the things that needs to be done is the consumers of political media have to decide what they want. Do they want politics as entertainment, or do they want politics as information? You know, because when we think about it, we wouldn't listen to a Wall Street analyst with no academic training in corporate finance or employment as a stock or bond trader or anything like that. And we wouldn't listen to a medical analyst. Can you imagine having, Sanjay Gupta's on TV talking about all sorts of medical things. But would you imagine people accepting somebody talking about a medical analyst and having no academic medical training or no academic medical employment? So I think ultimately this comes down to those of us who consume political media. We have to decide whether or not what we are getting is what we want, and if it's not, then we got to stand up and say so. And that was part of what led me to this. I'm hoping that people will consider, just because this person is popular doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best person for that position. And ultimately, my position is that we should never assume that because person A is less well known than person B, that person A is wrong and person B is always right. And that's one of the issues that I'm hoping to get people to pay attention to.
Well, I think that you've done that, and I know how good you are, and I think that really at the end of the day, I advocate for people to stop watching the news on television. I don't watch MSNBC. I don't watch CNN. I sure as hell don't watch Fox News ever since I vowed to not appear on that network anymore back in 2007. And
Sure.
And before that, I was on Fox News 3-4 times a week before I realized exactly how racist they could be. And I will say that, I think people of color, we have to liberate our minds and kind of let go of all this nonsense, because at the end of the day, when I consider my own perspective, I see a universe where, Roland can do his thing as a journalist, you can do your thing as a political scientist, and everybody gets an opportunity to have a voice that truly cares about the African American community, and that's really what we've lost in mainstream media. So, Dr. Fauntroy, I'll let you get the last word. Do you have anything else to add, or?
Well, you know what? I'm largely in agreement with you. Although I would tell you I'm a big fan of PBS and Find a News Hour and Bill Moyers and people like that to be very helpful. But ultimately, this stuff comes down to the people. The people have to decide. Are we still at a point where we're so desperate to see black faces on TV that we'll take any black faces on TV? And hopefully, we'll begin to think about that question, because I think the answer should be no. But obviously, and by the way, the criticism of me in the wake of this piece has been, 70% negative, and I'm a big boy. I can take that. That's not a big deal to me. But I just think that, people, we got to be more sophisticated in the way we consume political media, just like we have to be more sophisticated in how we consume our elected officials and our political candidates and all of that kind of stuff. So, hopefully some of my words will break through with some people. And I'd just like to leave it at that. Thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely, my friend. It's wonderful speaking to you. And also to those of you who are listening, I want to say thank you for checking us out at yourblackworld.com. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone.